I'm Pastor Peter Earle. Thank you for watching Video Bible College. We're studying the book of Romans and we're up to chapter 3. Now, if you've been with me for chapters 1 and 2, we're talking about deep doctrinal themes of sin and of judgment and the wrath of God. Not exactly what I call the most exciting themes. It's not the blessings themes, it's not the feel-good themes of victory and justification and salvation. But these are essential themes, and Paul uses it for 2 chapters, and now in the 3rd chapter, his argument. And it's simply this: if we don't appreciate the power of sin and how God feels about sin and what God must do with sin, then we'll probably never live the passion that we need to live the Christian life with. We'll live it half-heartedly, but if we understand how God feels about sin, we'll live differently. And if we live differently, then we'll get the blessings of God in a greater way, because whatever a man sows, he reaps. And so we want to make sure we reap good things, not bad things. And now, as we read Romans chapter 3, Paul begins to answer a series of quick questions and answers. Sometimes he only gives a one-sentence answer, but he's thinking about questions that people could ask because of what he's just said to these, because he can't go to Rome and he's not having a telephone conversation, so he's got to imagine the questions that he hears. And now we pick it up here at Romans chapter 3, verse 1. What advantage has the Jew? What's the profit of circumcision? He's just said that if you're Jewish or you're circumcised and you break the law, then you'll be judged. Eternal separation from God. The wrath of God's on you. So what's the good then? In verse 2 he said, much in every way, chiefly because to them were committed the oracles of God. He said the greatest privilege the Jewish people have is that they were given the oracles of God. They were given the laws of God. They were a privileged nation as a result of it. He said, and that's what. And then he goes to another question. He said, what if some did not believe? Will their unbelief make the faithfulness of God without effect? Certainly not. Indeed, let God be true and every man a liar, as is written, that you should be justified in your words, and you may overcome when you are judged. But if our unrighteousness demonstrates the righteousness of God, so he says, because God, we sin, he said, we're just proving that God is righteous and God's good, and we're just showing the contrast. And he said, well, isn't there a reward for that or a blessing for us? You know, how can our unrighteousness then, if it demonstrates the righteousness of God, our unrighteousness, what shall we say then? Is God unjust who inflicts wrath? He said, I'm speaking as a man. He said, certainly not. For then how will God judge the world? For if the truth of God has increased through my lie to his glory, why am I still judged as a sinner? And why not say, let us do evil that good may come? As we've slanderously reported, as some affirm that we say. This is the condemnation is just. What then, are we better than they? Not at all. For we have previously charged both Jews and Greeks that all are under sin. So he's not trying to say that the Gentiles are better than the Jews. He's not saying because they've broken these laws that they're worse off. He's just simply saying, no, he's trying to say everyone is guilty. We've just said that judgment is without impartiality in chapter 2, and now Paul's proving it. And he says this. He says, as it is written, there's none righteous, no, not one. There's no one who understands. There's no one who seeks after God. He said, they have all turned aside. They have together become unprofitable. There's no one who does good, no, not one. I think that explains how he feels. Not one. Then he goes on and says, their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they have practiced deceit. The poison asp is under their lips. So this is the whole body. Their throat, mouth, tongues, lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways. In the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. So he's saying every part of man, eyes, everything is cropped. There's nothing that does good. And now verse 19. For we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, that all the world may become guilty before God. Gentiles and Greeks, all the world. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, no flesh will be justified in the sight of God, For by the law is the knowledge of sin. Why did God give the law? It's the knowledge of sin. Let's think of it for a minute. a 2-year-old. As I said, sin is a nature within us. When you think of a 2-year-old, you say, don't touch. Sin's revealed because he wants to touch. And when God says don't, and we want to do it, we realize there's something inside me, and that's called sin, that compels me to do it. We'll see that more in Romans chapter 7. But we see that in us, there's something, a nature within us that causes us to do these acts of sin. And because we have the acts of sin, then it demonstrates our nature. And so Paul is saying that all the world is guilty. There's no excuse. Doesn't matter whether you're Jew or Gentile. But now he says this. Let's read verse 20 again. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, no flesh will be justified. There's no way of pleasing God, becoming just, by being acquitted. We're all guilty. In his sight, by the law, is the knowledge of sin. So why did God give the law? To reveal sin. Show us that nature within us. Now verse 20 said, but now the righteousness of God, apart from the law, is revealed, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, even the righteousness of God, which is through faith in Jesus Christ, to all and on all who believe, for there is no difference. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Verse 24, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Jesus Christ. So God says the good news is this. Now we're getting on to the good news section of Romans. We're getting into the salvation section. He said all the world is guilty. We can't please God. We can't get justified. We can't get righteous before him. We can't acquit ourselves. He said the only way we can quit ourselves is believing on Jesus Christ, because he died for our sins, and we have this exchange take place where he takes our sin and we take our righteousness. Therefore justified not by our acts, but we're justified by our faith, but not just faith, but our faith in the works of Jesus Christ, what he has done. And the good news is that he's died for our sin. That's the whole, when he got crucified on the cross of Calvary, he died for our sin. He took in our sin that we can take on his righteousness. This is the good news. The cross of Calvary, which is a shame to many of the Jews, but it's not a shame at all. It is God taking on our sins and dying to sin, overcoming death, so we can live for righteousness and live for eternity. And this is when we believe in that. And when we believe, we're justified. And so we come now to one of the major themes and major theological terms, justification. And we'll be talking about this more of our next session, what justification needs. But in a short sentence, we can say justification really means just as if I never sinned. In other words, I'm made perfect to God. How can I be perfect? Well, I can't do it by self-effort. There's no law, there's no works that will help me. But there is a person that can help me. Salvation doesn't come in a law. Salvation comes in the person of Jesus Christ. When I believe in what Jesus has done for me, take on his works, then I can be saved, I can be just before God. How easy is it to believe? It's a lot easier to believe than it is to try to work for it. And if we try to work for it, we'd fail because we're already guilty. Because you've only got to break one law to be a lawbreaker. You haven't got to break every one. We're sinners because we've broken one law, then we're sinners. But the good news is that we can be justified as if we never sinned. We can come back to God and he'll accept us and love us, and we're no longer under wrath, but we've made peace with him, and the blessings of God and the promises of God are now ours because of this gospel. What a glorious truth and what a power of God. No wonder Paul says the gospel is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes. It doesn't matter who you are, Gentile or Jew. It's not just for the Jews, it's for us Gentiles. What a great privilege. Thank you very much for watching this session. We'll pick you up in the next one.